For tutorial 7.2, let's do a quick review of the if function. We know the if function has three parts: the logic, the value to show if something is true, and the value to show if the result is false. So let's look at our scores here. So the Angels have 8, Dodgers have 7. Let's say that when the Angels win, we want to show Go Halos. When the Dodgers win, we want to show Go Blue. So a simple logic would be if 8 or A2 is greater than B7, then if that's true, if A2 is greater than B7, the Angels score more runs than the Dodgers, then we want it to say Go Halos. We want to show Go Halos. But if the Angels do not score more runs than the Dodgers, so if the Angels score, say, 7 and the Dodgers score 9, then we're going to show Go Blue. So let's put that into a formula. Equals if, then our parentheses. So there's our help right here. The logical test. We already said that if A2 is greater than B2, comma, we want to show Go Halos. Put our comma, but if that does not hold true, if A2 is not greater than B2, then we're going to show Go Blue. Close our parentheses, and there's our result. So in our scenario here, the Angels 8, Dodgers 7, Go Halos. But next day they play, and this time the Angels score 5 and the Dodgers go 7. So A2 is not greater than B2. So Go Blue. So there's our three parts. Remember that. This is important. You need to remember there are three parts. But now let's say that this is a Little League team where there could be ties. Well, the problem is if they tie, now because A2 is not greater than B2, it's tied, we're still saying Go Blue. We need a third alternative. We need what's called a nested if function. So let's bring our formula back. So if A2 is greater than B2, Go Halos. That part is still good. Here's where the problem lies. We need another if function because if A2 equals B2, remember in Little League, some Little Leagues you can have a tie game. So if A2 equals B2, then it's a tie. And because we're actually spelling tie, we need to tell Excel, hey, you know, there's text here. So we have to put it in quotations. So if A2 is greater than B2, we still need to show Go Halos. But if it's false, now we have another if function. So if A2 equals B2, then we have a tie. But if it's neither one of those, if A2 is not greater than B2 and A2 does not equal B2, then that's where our final comma comes in and we're going to say Go Blue. That's the only other option that's going to be left. Now, there's parentheses. How many do we have? We have 1, 2, 3. We cannot have an odd number of parentheses. So this parentheses is tied with that one. That one is going to be tied with this one. So now we have an even number in parentheses. So let's put our logic to the test. So we're going to hit enter. So if A2, well, let's start from the beginning. If A2 is greater than B2, the Angels won. Go Halos. If A2 is equal to B2, then it's a tie. But if A2 is not greater than B2, then it's go blue. So let's look at the nested if function one more time. Why is it called nested? Because there's an if within an if. And always go with the first logic immediately to the right of the first if function. So if A2 equals B2, then show go halos. But if it's false, you have to go to another if function. So if it's false, now we have to test if A2 equals B2, then it's a tie. Did it have to be this way? Well, no. Actually, what we could have easily have said, if A2 is less than B2, then I wanted to show go blue. But if A2 is not greater than B2, and if A2 is not less than B2, then there's only one thing left. It's a tie game. So does that hold true? Well, let's make it a tie game. There's a tie. So you have to understand what your logics are going to be. So your first logic, does it hold true? If it doesn't, what's your second logic? Does it hold true? And then if neither one of them hold true, then that's when you have, if neither holds true, then that's your third part of your formula. So hopefully this kind of helps you a little bit, because now we're going to start working on nested if functions from the textbook. Okay, if you stopped, well, you probably did. Let's look for your file that we did for tutorial 7.1, which is called something tracks. Let's see, talent tracks. So we're going to look for a file. In my case, it's in my OneDrive, my Spring folder, CIT 108, student data files. We're in Excel 7, tutorial, and then talent tracks. So there it is. So there's the file that we started working on. If you recall from the last video or the last session, we're in a table, and in Q1 we are going to insert another field. So remember, because we're working in a field, as soon as we add something, it's going to be added. It's going to be part of the field. So we're going to put bonus on K1, and we're going to make sure that Q2 is the active cell, and this is where we're going to put in a formula. So we know we want the if function, and the if function is going to say, if our pay grade is 1, then we want to show what is in cell Y2. Okay, so here we go. There's our pay grade. So if it's 1, then we wanted to show what's in Y2. Well, where is Y2? Let's see if we can scroll over to where Y2 is. And as you can tell, I recorded the video and the audio later, so now I have to wait for me to catch up and find. Okay, there we go. We're going to scroll over, and there's Y2. So Y2 says 2500. So if pay grade equals 1, then I wanted to show 2500. So if it's not 1, then we want to go to what's not. So 3 parts. If pay grade equals 1, then 2500. But if it's not, then I want you to look for, if pay grade is 2, then we wanted to show 5000. And if it's neither one of those, the only one left is pay grade 3, and that will show 7500. So here are our references that we're going to use for our formula. So let's click on our function bar, choose the logical category so that we can find if, and there's if. So we're going to select if, and we're going to input our first logic. And since it's a table, we're going to be working with our fields. So remember, our fields, which are up on top, need to be enclosed by brackets. So the logic begins with, if pay type equals 1, so I'm going to put pay type in brackets. So if pay type equals 1, then we want to show what is in field Y2. So let's scroll over and click on Y2. Now remember, if we're going to copy this formula down, we don't want this to be a relative reference. So we probably want to anchor this by clicking on the F4 key so we can make it an absolute reference. So that way if we copy this formula down, it's not going to move in relation to what we copy. Now if pay type is not 1, then we have to insert another if function. This is where the embedding comes in. So we're going to actually type if, then our parentheses, pay type, so that's a field, right? It's not a cell, we're going by the field, so it goes in brackets, pay type equals 2. Then we want to show Y3, which is 5,000. Once again, if we have to copy this formula, we want it to make sure that it's an absolute reference. So we're going to click on F4. And finally, if pay type is not 1, and if it's not 2, so we put our comma as our separation, and our final result is, well, if it's neither one of those, then it must be pay grade 3. Those are the only 3 options. So we're going to put a comma and then click on Y3. Once again, we want to anchor this cell. So if we copy the formula, it doesn't move in relation to what we're copying it to. So click F4. And so here we go. Let's review. If pay type equals 1, then show me what's in Y2. But if it does not equal 1, then I want you to go to the next layer, another if function. If pay type equals 2, then I want you to show me 5,000, which is in Y2. But if it's neither one of those, then we put in our other comma, and we want it to show the 7,500. So we have to close our formula now, because remember, our parentheses all have to match. So let's put our parentheses, match them up, make sure they're paired up, close our parentheses, and click OK, and let's see if this works. As we scroll over to see our pay type, we can see that our formula isn't working, because even though our pay type is 2 or 3, it's just straight up showing everything as 7,500. So this is the cool thing about doing things live, that the possibility of making a mistake is there. So let's go ahead and let's look at our formula and find out why it's not working. That has nothing to do with the autofill. There's nothing there that's going to help us. So let's actually look in the formula once again. We know there's an error. I copied the formula down. It's still not showing up. So let's take a look at the formula itself. What are we doing wrong? Open up the function text box, and well, here's the problem. I put the field pay type, and the pay type is either going to be S or H, so we actually want the pay grade. So let's replace pay type with the field pay grade in our logical tests, and also in our embedded if formula. So pay type, change that to pay grade, and now let's go ahead and click OK. Let's see if it works. So our very first one should be 3. It should show 7,500. So let's take a look if everything matches up. Let's take one more look, make sure that our formula works out well, and we're gonna double check. Everything looks pretty good. Everything looks okay. So we have the correct field, we have the correct references, they are absolute, and let's go ahead and double check. Yep, there it is. All these values, if each one is true. So let's go ahead and click OK, and now we see that our formula works. So if it's a 3, it's 7,500. If it's a 2, it's 5,000, and if it's a 1, it's 2,500. Now we want to apply the accounting number format to our field or our column Q. So if you recall, we take our cursor, and as soon as we see this solid black arrow, we click on it. That highlights the range, and we apply the accounting. Let's hold it there. So there it is, accounting number format, but we don't want any decimal places, so we decrease decimal. Click on that twice, and we are done with the nested if function. Now let's test our references. As we can see, if the pay grade is 1, the bonus is 2,500. This is the beauty of using references instead of numbers in our formula. We could have easily have put in, instead of Y2, we could have put in a number, 2,500. But let's say that we had a especially good year, so we want to give bonuses for pay grade 1. We want to make it 2,750. If we look at all of our fields where our pay type is 1 or pay grade is 1, so this 2,500, all the ones that are 1 should change to 2,750. And sure enough, there it is. All of these pay grade 1s change to 2,750. So we don't have to go in and redo the formula. We just change our references. As you can see, the nested if function can work really, really well. The problem is you can only go, I think, about 7 layers, 6 or 7 layers. So you could have if something, then show this. But if it's not true, you can do another if function. And if that's not true, then you can do another if function. If that's not true, you can go to, I think the level is about 6 or 7. Well, that could get to be a very, very cumbersome formula. So instead, you can do something called a Vlookup. The V, by the way, stands for vertical. For the next section, we're going to go to the Lookup Tables tab at the bottom. And as you can see, the name of this table is called Health Plan Rates. This table is called the Recognition Table. As you can see, the name of it is right here, Table Names. So we're going to go somewhere in our Health Plan Rates. And this is what we want to do. We want to go to cell R1 in our employee data. So in R1, we're going to enter health. Health cost. Hit enter. Now, we're going to perform a search as follows. If the value in our lookup table if the value in our table here, so for example, let's look for the field, and let's see, where's the field I'm looking for? 2L2. Okay, so here's how it's going to look. If the value that we're looking for equals what's in L2, so it's starting to look like an if function, but it's really not. Let's think about this carefully. If in L2 is HMOF, then we want to look at the lookup table and show 1500. So we're matching up the entries on our health plan rates table to the field in our health plan. So we want to match up. We don't want to put a bunch of if functions. We want to do something called a Vlookup, vertical lookup. So let's look up this entry in this table, and when you find it vertically, come across and give us this color, this number. If it's nothing, or if it's something else like PPOI, so we're going to look for PPOI in our lookup table, it's going to show 950. If it's none, then it should give us 0. And well, how does that work? First of all, I already told you that it's called a Vlookup. So we are going to click on our function, and this time it's not going to be a category. This is going to be a lookup and reference. The name kind of tells you that, it's going to be Vlookup, so it's going to be lookup, and we're looking for Vlookup. So we're going to scroll down, and there it is, Vlookup. Click OK, and the value that we're looking for is whatever happens to be in L2, right? So there's our formula. It's starting to show up. There it is, Vlookup, and the lookup value is whatever is in L2. So right now we're going to click on L2. And by default, this is actually trying to put in a field that we are not really ready to work on yet. So we're actually going to override that and put L2. So Vlookup, the value we're looking for is L2. And the table that we're going to be looking for, if you recall from our lookup table, is called let's get rid of that. We already know that it's called the health plan rates table, right? So we clicked a few too many times here. So let's try that again. We know that we want whatever is in that table, the health plan rates. We don't need everything else. So the health plan rates table, and what we want is to display, when it actually finds it, we want it to display what is, well, let's go ahead and go back here, take that out. So we know that the value in L2, if it matches up with whatever is shown in the first column of our health plan rates table, by the way, by default, it's always looking for the first column of your table. Remember that when you are creating your table for Vlookup. So what we want to display, is the second column, because our prepared table, the number, the lookup value that it's going to look for is always going to go to the first column. So we want it to go to, once it finds it, we want it to go to column 2. Now, this is a little tricky. What is it we wanted to show the range lookup? If we put true, it's going to look for an approximate value. So it's going to be like, is it close? But we want an exact match. We want it to say whatever is in L2. So we're going to put in false. So in order to find an exact match, we put false. Now, here's another very, very important thing. In our table, our first row has to be sorted in some kind of ascending order. So let's make sure that we've done that, but for now, our formula stands. So this is what we're saying. We want you to look up the value in L2. And once you find the value in L2, we want you to go to the lookup table, which is B3 through C8, but because it's a table, we don't have to give that range of cells. We simply give the name of the table that we've given, that range of cells. And the first column, remember I said, has to be sorted in some kind of ascending order. Well, HMOF, F comes before I, H comes before P, and P comes before N. So as you can see, we've already sorted it in ascending order by name of plan, and the second column of our table doesn't really matter. So we've verified that our first column is in ascending order. So let's go back to our employee data table and see how that worked. We know that if L2 is HMOF, then it should show 1500. If it shows PPOI, it should be 950, which it does show. And if it's HMOI, it should show 875. If it's PPOF, it should show 1650. And if it's none, then it should show 0. So notice that once again we've got basically several parts for our function. We have, well, let's just go ahead and do something here. So there's all the parts that we have to fill out. We have the lookup value. What value are we looking for? In this case, we were looking for the value in L2. Could we have put in HMOF? Yes, we could have, but then it wouldn't be dynamic. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't we make this an absolute reference? Well, that's because when we want to copy it, we want our formula to come down along with the cell that we're referencing. The next thing it's looking for is the table array. That's the second value that it's going to be looking for. Now, the table array in our lookup table, our table actually already has a name, right? So it was health plan rates. If we did not have a table, our table array would show up in the form of a range of cells. So it could have been, what we could have done is we could have put L2, comma, our table array could have actually been from our lookup table, and we could have actually highlighted B3 through C8. Now, in our formula, though, it's trying to put in health plan rates because it sees that it has a table name to it. But we could overwrite that. We could actually just put B3 through C8. So that's our table array. Now, once again, the column index is telling us, okay, in this array, which column do you want us to show? Once we find it in column 1, which column do you want to display as a result? So it's 2. And because we want an exact value, we're going to choose false. So it's going to look for an exact match. So our Vlookup in L2, we're looking for the range which is in our lookup table. So we're going to click on lookup tables here, right? And click OK. So we were missing that. So let's look at our formula. We're looking for L2 in our table, and we are trying to find whatever's in L2 in the lookup tables sheet, and we're looking in the range B3, C3, and the results we want to show are from column 2, and we're looking for an exact match, so it's false. So as you can see, if we were to copy this down, our results would be the same. The reason this isn't working actually is because we are missing something here. Our range has to be absolute. So there's our range, absolute, but what we're looking for should not be absolute. So let's try this again. Copy down. So now we see that our numbers are going to match up exactly the same. So by the book, we did a Vlookup to a table. So here we did by table name, which the table was called health plan rates. We're still looking for column 2, and we want an exact match. If we didn't have a table, you know that the second part of our Vlookup, our range, we could put a range of cells. And we have to remember to have absolute references of our cells, of our range, so that when we copy it, it always goes to the same one. Once again, we go to column 2, and that's how VLOOKUP works. It's really not very complicated. You just kind of have to know what you're looking for. As far as the results, what you're trying to match up, where you're looking for it, and where that column exists. So if you had a table that had 6 columns and you wanted the value from that 6th column, instead of putting 2 here, you would put 6. So we want to apply the accounting number format. So once again, we go up to our arrow, click on it. We're going to home. We're going to our accounting, but we don't want, we don't want our decimal places. There we go. 1500. And that is pretty much how we use the VLOOKUP formula. Now, we're going to modify the formula in our calculated column. So we're going to go to R2, and we're going to find out, because remember, this is a monthly fee, the health cost. And we want to know what the health cost is for the year. So because we know this is a monthly rate, it's actually quite simple to make this an annual cost. All we have to do is multiply by the number of months in a year, which is 12, right? And now we know what our cost is for the year, which is simply multiplying by 12. So that is our VLOOKUP for an exact match. Now, why would we need a VLOOKUP for an approximate match, or kind of close? Well, here's why. Let's go to our lookup table sheet, and we see that the years of service, and for so many years of service they get an award and they get cash. If you notice that the years of service are separated by 0, 1, 3, 5, 7. Well, what if they have 2 years? If it's an exact match, well, they're not going to get a bonus. So that means that they only get a bonus every odd year. Well, that really doesn't make sense. So here's what happens. We're looking for an approximate match. So if they have 2 years of service, it's going to roll down to the 1 and give them 100. If it's 6 years of service, it's going to roll down to year 5 and go to $300. If it's 8, 9, 10, anything above 7, the closest thing down or lower from the number of years of service is going to be 500. So 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever value is above 7, they're going to get a $500 award recognition. So let's go back to our employee data sheet, and in the S1 we're going to type award. Once again, our table increases, and this is where we start putting in our formula. So we know it's a VLOOKUP. So we're going to go to our function, and since we last looked for lookup and reference, VLOOKUP should be in the same place, and click OK. So the value that we're looking for now, this time, instead of looking for L2 or a cell value, remember it's a table, so let's go ahead and take advantage of the fact that it's a field. So we're going to go to years of service and click on that cell, but notice that it comes up with a lot of funky stuff. So let's get rid of all the other brackets and just stick with the field year service. Our array, well, we know that the table in our lookup tables is called recognition. That is the recognition table. All right. And we know that we want to display what's in column 2. And remember, this time we don't want an exact value. So we're going to actually put in false because we want an approximate value. The approximate value is okay. There is nothing that we need to anchor. There are no absolute references. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. So this is the nice part about having a table, that we can just put the field. We don't have to worry about any anchoring. The table array, we named the table recognition. We're looking for column 2. So everything is looking pretty darn good. So let's click OK. And now we get our results. So we obviously did something wrong. So let's look at our Vlookup. And let's see, what did we do wrong? Are we looking at the recognition table? Yes, we are. And we're looking at column 2. We are. And in our range lookup, we have, oh, here's the problem. It's true. So if we want an approximate lookup, it's true. If we want an exact match, it's false. So I messed up. So there we go. So when there's 6 years of service, there is no 6 in our lookup table. So it rolls down to whatever 5 is. And that is one more Vlookup function that we've established. So we want the, once again, the accounting number format. So we go to numbers, accounting, we take away the 2 decimal points, and that is how we perform another Vlookup using the table name instead of a cell name. Now, the HLOOKUP works very, very similar to the Vlookup, but here's how it would work. If we had another table here, and let's just go ahead and copy this there and copy this here, and we were to copy, well, here, let's make this easy, equals that equals that equals that. That didn't work. So equals that equals that equals that equals that equals that. Okay, before we were looking at a table and we were looking for the value vertically, and then we were showing the second column as a result that we wanted to show. The HLOOKUP works the exact same way, except it's going exactly that way. It's going horizontally. So we would be looking for a horizontal value from our table. We would be looking at row 2 instead of column 2 to show the results. That's the only difference between Vlookup and HLOOKUP. They work the exact same way. All right. Now, let's go to our employee data. And if we go down toward the bottom, we see that we have an error under health cost. And if a person is typing stuff in, they're not going to understand, well, why does it say NA? Well, quite easily, it's because they typed in the wrong code here under the health plan. So we want something a little bit more descriptive than NA. So here's how we do this. We go down to where the error was, and we want to let them know that they did something wrong. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to put between the equals and the Vlookup, we're going to enter something called if error. So if there's an error when we do the VLOOKUP, that's basically what we're saying. So if error, and if there's an error, what we want to display is invalid code. So how do we do that? Well, you know that after every function we have to have a parentheses, right? This is no different. So we go to our parentheses. If error, then we want it to display something else. So if there's an error in this function, we want it to display, and this is in quotations, invalid code. So here's what we're saying. If there's an error in this entire formula of our VLOOKUP, separate that by a column. We got to have a comma there, separate by a comma. Then we want to show invalid code. Now we have to have equal number of parentheses. So we go ahead and close our parentheses. So now if there's an error, notice that, by the way, when we do any change in our formula within a table, it propagates all the way across. So by showing us invalid code, that's a little bit more descriptive than that NA that was showing up before. So if error is always a great function to use in conjunction with some of our other functions. So for example, we could have used the if error in our if statements, but in the VLOOKUP it works really well because now when there's a health cost, oh, invalid code, they know that, oh, I got to go to my health plan and give it a correct code. So a little bit of validation there, and that takes care of tutorial 7.2. Now we'll go ahead and work on tutorial 7.3. Before we close this, let's make sure that we do a file save as, because we want to indicate that this is for tutorial 2. So let's go ahead and just put a 2 there, and when we start with tutorial 7.3, we know that we're going to open with Talent Tracks 2 so that we have our individual files.